Welcome to Quantum Quill Media Podcast, where we explore the cutting-edge innovations in AI, robotics, and technology shaping our future. I'm your host, Ken, and today we have a fascinating guest joining us. Our guest today is Dr. Adrian Smales, a research associate at the National Robotarium at Heriot-Watt University. Dr. Smales holds a PhD in health informatics and has dedicated his career to working with robots. His work is at the forefront of integrating robotic technology into healthcare, aiming to revolutionize patient care and improve health outcomes. Dr. Smales' research combines the intricacies of health informatics with the advanced capabilities of robotics, creating innovative solutions that are set to change the way we interact with technology in medical settings. Today we'll delve into his journey, the challenges and breakthroughs in his research, and what the future holds for robotics in healthcare. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Adrian Smales to the show.
Let me do that.
Dr. Smales, it's an honor to have you here with us today. Let's start by learning a bit about your background and what inspired you to pursue a career in robotics and health informatics.
Yeah, sure. So my background, I have a number of kind of qualifications. I have my undergraduate. I'm actually an electronic and computer engineer. That's what I did, and I started out in networking. I didn't go down the software route necessarily, although there was a lot of software kind of back then in my undergraduate degree. But I went into kind of networking and really found myself gravitating towards cyber security. We didn't have a what we call a SOC now. There was no security operations center back then. We called it our network operations center. It was all to do with networking. And then we had one or two people who would try and gain access into your establishment, and that was super interesting to see. Now we call them hackers, and there's lots of them, and they can do that. So that was my first kind of foray into that, and I was managing a manufacturing site where we had lots of different types of equipment to do with the IT. I then decided that I wanted to go and do an MBA, so I did that. So a lot of the management and understanding of how businesses actually run, and that worked really well. And so I got a really good broad education because I moved around and chose particular roles and jobs that would highlight particular skills. And so I did those. So I became what you call an interim manager. I became a project manager, operations director. And so these skills really evolve your particular knowledge of business in general, but specific kind of sectors. So I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in R&D. I was the head of IT for the Natural History Museum in London, which was a phenomenal role for me. I love that to bits. But then I kind of, serendipity plays a part in my career in a number of parts. I happened to meet one of my old lecturers from a conference that I was attending in Germany. I was flying back into Luton, and I turned round and he was one person behind me actually, and we got chatting, and he said, "What are you up to now?" We recognised each other immediately, and this was Professor Bill Buchanan. So he is an absolute powerhouse in the world of cybersecurity and now cryptography. And he said, wow, that sounds great. And have you thought about doing a PhD? And I said, no. He said, well, write up a proposal and we'll see what we can do. So I wrote up a proposal. And that particular time, in the way that they were evolving, I could have either gone into cybersecurity or healthcare. And they just got a really big, interesting collaboration going with Imperial College in London around healthcare. So I decided to do that. And I set my kind of PhD to try and look at frailty in the elderly, which I go through phases of being mercenary and working, for the highest bidder. But then I go through periods of being really philanthropic and trying to do social good within wherever I can. And so I kind of moved from, being an interim manager and doing all that consultancy to very much more philanthropic work and looking at how I could develop my own skills. And that's where the AI comes in, because I was using wearables to look at how we could predict and prevent the escalation of risk within the frail and elderly using wearable devices. So your Fitbit, your Polar, your Nike watch, or whatever, iWatch and all that kind of stuff, the Apple Watch. And so I was using data from that, and I managed to come up with an algorithm that became software as a medical device. And so that was my, initial interest into looking at AI and how that actually is an incredibly powerful tool, because you train it on the data that you want, and you have to understand all of the little idiosyncrasies within building that model to answer the question that you're after. And in the beginning, in the early days, we couldn't build the models weren't so big and they weren't as evolved as they are now. The processing 10 years ago wasn't anywhere close to what it is today and what it will become. NVIDIA have massively invested in their technology platforms, and that really hasn't begun to bear fruit yet, but it will. And ChatGPT 5, 6, 7 will start to emerge. But what it demonstrates is that very quickly you can build these models that have real world impact, and that's incredibly powerful. And what we're seeing now is AI, or this evolution of what we call machine learning, is becoming incredibly useful to pretty much everybody in their everyday life. Anybody can pick up ChatGPT or ask Alexa, tell me a recipe that includes, sausages and muffins, or whatever it happens to be. I've got this stuff in the fridge, tell me what I can make from it, right? Yeah. So even at that level, or you can ask ChatGPT to code you your website. Now with ChatGPT 4.40, you can actually write out your website, draw it pictures, put that in and say, this is the website look and feel that I want. I want it this color. I want you to write me the HTML and the CSS. It will go away and build you your website. Yeah. So it's this democratization that really people are trying to understand. Everybody can do it. So we go back 10 years, 15 years, that level of integration was done by the Big Four. You had to be a Big Four consultancy. You had to be a multi-million, dollar industry. You had to have hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of free capital to try and invest in that kind of integration. And then by and large, it was very much hit and miss based upon the technologies that were available at the time. Now, you can integrate stuff using websites. And you just talk to it and say, I want a presentation on this. I want you to create me a formula for Excel on that. And you just talk to ChatGPT, and all of the other LLMs, the large language models that exist, and they will create you some, very credible output. We still need to be careful about what it tells you, and you still need to be vigilant and check. But by and large, it's getting to be incredibly powerful and useful. And as society, it's that usefulness that is a double-edged sword, because what it starts to do, it starts to erode into what we would have done at the lowest levels of maybe office work. Because, historically, you had the typist that would simply regurgitate that. We don't have typists now. Everybody can use a computer. So we need to progress in this upskilling to understand what is my role within this new environment. How can I best use this technology so that it gives me value, it gives my employer or me personally value. And we're still getting to grips with that, because there are many people, and this is a historical fact, this isn't anything new, that see this change as both good and bad. Change in itself isn't necessarily bad, it's how we perceive it and how we can manage that, and the part and the role we play in that change. And for right now, there is no such thing as AI, actually. Artificial intelligence doesn't exist. Even with ChatGPT 4.0, that doesn't understand its output. It doesn't. That's why we still have the disclaimer at the bottom saying, it can make errors, please check its output. Because no matter how good it is, it doesn't understand what it's telling you, right? And that actually, 10 years time, possibly less, we might have, what we might consider to be incredibly intelligent, AI that can check its output. And the thing is that these models, they are incredibly expensive to build. And, we will run in the end into the world is only so big. There has only been so much written and human knowledge. And we will very soon be able to consume and process all of that. And then how do you make the next model more intelligent? Now, what I want you to kind of, bear in mind is that the future, we're only just starting this journey, right? And the biggest AI models, ChatGPT 4.0 or 5 or whatever's next, they're still incredibly difficult to run. They need vast amounts of processing power on vast servers still. But the response and the way that they work is absolutely phenomenal. Now, imagine the gateways and the doors that could open from using what I'm calling silicon-based, right, AI right now. It's machine learning, but we'll call it AI. So silicon-based modeling of these large scales. It takes 3 months minimum and about $100 million to make one, right? Wow. It's phenomenally expensive to process that vast amount of information to make ChatGPT 4 and whatever. Now, the work that NVIDIA has done may reduce that because they're creating, silicon and their entire processing capability to try and reduce that. And the majority of that is to do with the power consumption that the servers take while they process that information. So, where I'm going with this is that's silicon machine learning, AI. What that will open up in the future is something that, Star Trek, if you're a Trekkie, kind of alluded to, and this is biological computing. So this is where we can then start to create what we might call gel packs. And these gel packs actually host the neural networks. So silicon AI will be able to create the framework within which we can then start to create true neural networks in a biological sense. Now, if you think about the size of a rat brain and what a rat brain can actually process and how physically small that is, that's amazing. Just imagine what you could do with a rat brain. Not only are they incredibly dexterous, you can train a rat to do stuff. It controls its own bodily functions. Half or 3/4 of its brain is doing other autonomic stuff in the background, right? So with that level of processing capability, it runs on 1 or 2 watts of power. 1 or 2 watts of power, that's all. To do that in machine learning, you'd need banks and banks of servers currently to be able to do that. So if we can then use this, the silicon technology to reduce the power consumption, that then opens up a whole realm of possibility in the future for incredibly low power, high performant computing, where you can have parallel nodes running almost anything on incredibly low power. And potentially all you need to feed them is a bit of glucose. Your brain only runs on glucose. It just runs on sugar, nothing else. Your entire body is just there to provide glucose to your brain. That's all it's there for, right? And so if we can provide glucose to that network and it can consume it, that's just sugar. You can have all of that processing capability running it on sugar. And so this is kind of, next generation. That's 50 years because we need, but this is the thing. Nobody really knows because actually AI could shorten that. We've seen in the last 5 years, evolution of processing power that is becoming exponential. It's not just linear, it's actually exponential. And every model that we bring will shorten that timescale down because it'll be able to do more, process more in less time. And so we're now working, Moore's law said, basic computing power would double in processing capability every 18 months, right? We're doing that every 3 months now with AI. Every model that we bring out in 3 months is doubling the capability potentially of what that AI previous generation could do. And so that's the true mark of the evolution of technology. It's no longer bound to silicon. Why? Because we just parallel process everything. We just throw more compute, more memory, more resource at that problem. And it just scales like that. So we are no longer constrained by Moore's law. We're simply constrained by the imagination of what you could use it for.
So given your extensive experience, what do you see as the most significant advancements in AI and robotics in recent years? What do you think it would be?
I think it's the democratization. It's the ability for everybody to be able to access it. I can access ChatGPT 4 and 4.0, which arguably is some of the most advanced technology in the world, and I was able to do that within weeks of it being published through a website. And I pay my $20, my £20, and I can have access to that almost instantly. It's that democratization, and I think that is one of the most significant advancements, is how everything now is being used to its effect by the general public at large. I think that is where this is groundbreaking. Never before, even the internet took years to evolve and develop. AI, we're talking months. Everybody can see it, and everybody's clamoring for the next model. Give me the next model. What can it do for me? And I think that it's the democratization, and it's the way businesses are now using it. And this is where the challenge lies. Just because you can doesn't mean to say you should, because even a hammer can be used for good or bad, right?
Yes.
A hammer intrinsically is destructive. It drives nails into wood. That wood is damaged. But with a craftsman, you can build marvelous creations. So we need to be much more aware of what it can be used for and manage it in a way that is transformative and for the good, because we can all think of damaging ways it could be used. It's going to take my job, it's going to take work away from me, And throughout history, that's always been a consideration for new technology. But actually, no one has ever lost their job yet from using a machine learning tool. It's always created new project managers. It's always created new ideas. It's always spawned, something new and different that can be incorporated.
Given the increasing presence of robots in the workforce, particularly within companies like Amazon, where robots are taking over roles traditionally performed by humans, what are the implications for the workers who are being replaced by these robots? How is this transition affecting their employment and livelihoods?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, and this is kind of the case in point. But on the surface, that would appear to be true. However, when you actually start to speak, and the example I was speaking to somebody today who I was giving a tour around the Roboterium, and the story that he told me was around receptionists in a GP, a general practice, a doctor's surgery. And they are usually, the most hard-worked and customer-facing. So these are people who are usually doing very routine, very mundane, very repetitive jobs. The turnover of those people is huge to the business. It takes weeks for you to train them. They last 2 or 3 months and then they leave. So actually, we say that they're doing that role, and they do, but it's out of necessity, not because they actually want to do that job. Given any other role, potentially, they would choose that. And they do. And that's the challenge. So when you want somebody to take on that role, you, as a business, and you have that kind of job, you have to be prepared that they will come and go incredibly frequently. So consequently, you don't want to train them too much. You don't want to invest in them too much, because history has taught you that they will be leaving very quickly. They will be going to bigger and better things, and they're only doing it because at the moment it's filling a need. It's not a career role that they would want to fulfill. So on the basis of that, the businesses that can invest, like Amazon, into having something that alleviates and elevates their workforce to get rid of that routine and mundane workforce, their jobs are really much more fulfilling than they would be otherwise.
So yeah.
and that's the that's the true kind of nature of the the state. And if that's all the job you can get, there will still be, for some considerable time, roles for you like that in society. You just need to be keen about where you go and how you do it. But actually, those are not the jobs you should aspire to. If it's all that you can do, then that's fine. But and they will exist for a little while. But the companies that can replace them, 24/7 with automation, they will do that, because they're difficult roles to keep going.
Thank you so much for joining us. To our listeners, if you wish to join us on this podcast, do let us know by email. We hope you've enjoyed delving into the fascinating world of robotics and AI with us. Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, the future is closer than you think. If you have any questions you'd want us to answer or talk about next, please send it to our email on roborevolution@quantumquill.uk. Until next time, keep innovating, and may your circuits be charged with inspiration. This is Quantum Quill Media signing off.
Stay tuned and please keep listening for the second section of this podcast if you enjoyed it.